Saloni, hi. Welcome to SpeakEasy with Dheeraj Sinha and welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Dheeraj, for having me. It's completely my pleasure.
So I want to start at the beginning, Saloni. I mean, what's really been the story, right? From being a banker to an entrepreneur and now the VC, right? So take us through the whole story.
Yeah, it's an interesting journey, and I'll go back a little further because my background's been a little non conventional in a sense because my grandparents, like many others, were refugees from Pakistan who came to India after partition with not much more than the clothes on their back. And even though my grandparents, while they had nothing, they had their education, they were both master's students, which you can imagine in the 1940s is a huge accomplishment, especially for my grandmother. And when they started setting up in India, obviously there were immense struggles and challenges, but there was a complete emphasis on grit and perseverance and resilience, which in a way filtered to how my father was brought up. In a way, in turn, I was brought up. And my parents were very entrepreneurial, and my father was a first generation entrepreneur, and he saw a fair share of both immense success and immense failure, and both of them carved their careers in finance. So both my parents were stockbrokers, in fact, and my mother was India's first technical stock analyst and was awarded the Mahila Shiromani Award from the First Lady back in 1990, and she wrote a book on technical stock analysis. So banking, finance, investing were dinner table conversations at home. And my parents were incredibly progressive and they encouraged curiosity and a questioning mind very early on. And that held me in good stead, both as an entrepreneur and now as an investor. So in my mind, all my life choices were culmination of all the experiences I had at home, which was around building a strong foundation in finance, then setting up my own company, particularly in a sector like gaming interactive, which in itself is very non-conventional, and then finally embarking down the path of investment and VC.
Yeah, and that makes me curious about, or rather, I mean, it kind of falls in line with what you're telling me, that why choose gaming and media? A, it's very specific, and B, not the flavor, right? And we talk to a lot of founders and VCs on this show, and the flavor of the season is D2C. So, and I'm personally absolutely excited because given that we are in advertising and so on and so forth, there's so much happening. So I'm excited about media and gaming. But what made you excited?
Yeah, so it is again goes back to my childhood. I used to read a lot and used to love immersing myself in fantasy fiction. So growing up, Xena Warrior Princess was my role model. I used to love sci-fi. So I was an avid enthusiast of this show called The X-Files. And I loved getting lost in alternative worlds. So gaming was almost like a natural escape where games like Civilization or Legend of Zelda and world building and exploration were of deep interest to me. But I guess what stuck out for me in game worlds was that I never saw anyone like me in a game world, which was a brown female protagonist. And I never saw other girls game. So it was a very non-conventional interest to have for a girl in the 1990s. But even as a career choice, it wasn't my first career choice because the first 6-7 years of my life I spent in investment banking and private equity, which are somewhat more traditional. I went to business school, and then I joined Morgan Stanley. I was an investment banker doing M&A. Then I went to Barclays. I spent over 6-7 years and executed nearly $10 billion of M&A deals. But I think there was a breaking point which occurred when I got completely burnt out from work. And sometimes, you can only see these connections in hindsight. But I was approached by a colleague of mine who I went to business school with to launch a gaming company. And the first time I spoke to him about the idea, I was deeply excited about it. But I said, well, I can't believe this to be a serious career opportunity. So, you know what? I'm going to consult with you for a bit. And that consulting ended up transforming into me becoming a co-founder, eventually becoming CEO of the company. And that was an incredible ride because I ran the company for 4 years. And it was an incredibly fantastic learning experience. And given how passionate I was about gaming, I used to joke that if I wanted to see a brown female protagonist in a game, I'll probably have to build it myself. And the vision was so much broader because it was to build an immersive world with narrative and dialogue to enable meaningful interactions with AI characters, but with a focus on female audiences. And we did a lot of cool stuff. It was a great team. We did interesting partnerships. We did tie-ups with celebrities and brands. I was a jury member at the BAFTA Games Awards, and I was headquartered in UK, but I also had an India SKU. And it was an incredible learning experience. Eventually, I had an acquisition that went south and I had to close the company down, but I transitioned to VC investing and I moved to my seed investor, which was a fund called LVP, who was again a interactive gaming focused fund, but investing in Europe and North America. And that was my first journey into embracing gaming or interactive as an asset class. And that's my first exposure to where I saw the power of interactive media. And that's when it became very apparent to me. And the fund was enormously successful. The partners had made early bets in Supercell, Unity, Natural Motion, Playfish, and they delivered over $14 billion in shareholder value. So it was an incredible experience to be sitting and getting a full view of essentially where the future of interactive or gaming is going to go. And part of that story was India emerging as a major hub. And, global industry is now $200 billion and India is now 10% of that, accounting for nearly $2.2 billion. And that is because of a change in the technology paradigm and the emergence of digital natives. Now we're all talking about the metaverse. And that led me to building Lumikai, which is India's first gaming and interactive media fund.
Fascinating. And the other thing, Salone, I see is that a lot of VCs, a lot of investors are just that, right? They're just investors, right? I mean, a lot of my founder friends crib about that, they just understand money. They don't understand my category. They don't understand my business. They've never run a business, right? And we have all kind of insider jokes between founders and investors. So, but the difference with you is that gaming company, right? You come from a very deep domain expertise. So I wanted to pick your brains on what do you think makes for successful investing? What are you looking for in the companies that you're putting your money behind? Are you looking for the founders? Are you looking for the concept? Are you looking for somebody who's already delivered a POCs and on a big delta? What are the 3-4 things that you're looking out for?
Yeah. Every investor has a different framework and a different mental model and a different investor methodology. And it also depends on what stage of investing they are looking at, whether they're early stage or growth stage or, late stage. For me personally, I love the 0 to 1 journey. That's the journey that I deeply understand and also empathize with, right? Many investors come in and even after they invest, often they treat founders as if they're still on two opposite sides of the table in terms of the way they ask questions, in terms of the way they even offer assistance to the founders, where it's almost like us versus them. And that's the first thing I think as for me as an investor is once you invest in the founder, you're on the same team. You're then part of the portfolio company's founding team, and the only thing that you have to do is to enable them to build. And that's a very key, understanding that I have embraced as an investor. The second understanding that I embraced as an investor is that I'm no longer an operator. So even though there are sometimes you feel you want to do more, there's sometimes you want to feel like you can get in and guide the company in a certain way, I think you have to resist that urge to be over-involved, because a founder looks up to you for detached advice, and you can't possibly do that if you're so ingrained within the business of the founder. But barring, aside those two investment methodologies, we as a fund are very early stage focused. So that often means it's pre-revenue. Sometimes it's even pre-MVP when it is two founders with an idea who just want to brainstorm with us, who just want to jam with us. And at that stage, there are multiple risks, right? These are unproven founders many times around, untested products, untapped markets, competitors whose behaviors that can't be forecast. And there's so few knowns and so many unknowns that the essence of this unpredictability just cannot be captured by neat financial models. So what I do is try to build a 5-level T model, which I call it, which is essentially the first is the team. It ultimately comes down to what makes this founder or founding team uniquely positioned to build this company. Do they have a certain way of thinking? Do they have a certain skill set or a certain experience that will really set them up for success? That's critical. The second is talent and unique positioning, their ability to attract talent and tell a story, because a founder is always selling. And that's a very key point that I always tell my portfolio founders, that it's not just about raising money. You're selling all the time. You're selling to your partners, you're selling to your team, you're selling to the next strategic connections that you want to make. At every point of time for company building, you're going to be selling, and you better have your unique positioning and vision down pat. The third key is this third prong of this T model is tenacity, right? They're passionate and committed. Are they going to be devoted to building this company for the next 10 years? Or after 6 months, they're going to pivot and shut shop? And that is a very, very key criteria for us. And that often reflects in if founders have switched too many jobs, or they've started companies, shut down companies, started companies, shut down companies too often in their career. It gives you an indication of that this person may have a much higher aptitude for novelty seeking as opposed to actually company building. Then there is total awareness, which is taking feedback, listening, assimilating, while at the same time having some kind of an inner conviction and inner compass that all great founders have to see something that others don't. And I think that again gets tested during conversations, because many times when we speak to founders and we have a point of view, I love hearing founders who can come back and say, well, no, actually you're wrong. And these are the 3 reasons why you're wrong, because I have these customer insights which you don't know about. And I think that's incredibly powerful. And the last is thesis, and that's more internal. That comes down to what is our thesis on this market? Is this market untapped, or is this market completely overcrowded and full of competition? And even if that is so, where is the identified scope for disruption? So broadly, these are the 5 T's that we look at when at least I am analyzing a founder.
That's lovely. That's an amazing framework. In fact, this can be carried forward to any business, right? I mean, it's so amazing. And some of the things that you spoke about, resilience, right? Tenacity is just so important. I mean, at Leo Burnett, we have one of the values, we call it bounce back energy, right? I mean, we're in a service business, a tough business, right? I mean, something will go wrong. Can you get back in the morning, chin up and say, okay, bring it on? So yeah, I think it's a fantastic framework. But just picking a bit more on that, Salone, you spoke about thesis and what stage is the market in. And early stage investment was more of, you are the Uber of India, or you are the Amazon of India, and so on and so forth. So we were doing more control C, control V with proven models and proven technologies. You were saying, okay, this works offline. Can I take it online? Okay, sounds good. Where are you with that? I mean, are you getting more into areas where thesis is proven, or are you going more into blue oceans? And
yeah, again, that's an incredibly important question to answer, because there are 2 folds. One is what's happening on the macroeconomic side, and then what's happening, let's say, within gaming and interactive per se. Now, if we are to look at, let's say, the current boom in startups, India is at an incredible inflection point, because we're now more than one venture cycle old in India, right? And by that I mean that typically venture capital funds are 10 to 12 year life cycles. We've seen that first evolution happen. And between 2011 and 2020, PE and VC activity was $200 billion. In 2021 alone, we saw nearly $80 billion of PE VC activity in 1 year alone. And that was the first time inflows into India have actually beaten China. India is now the 3rd largest ecosystem for startups. We have more than 45 odd unicorns. And so the startup wave has just begun. And in a way, it unshackles innovation, it catalyzes product breakthroughs, and it just shakes up the old way of doing business. And that's, I guess, on the macro side. Also, the timing has been very good. Stock market liquidity has been at all-time high. So some of these companies either got acquired or they've exited via IPOs. And the retail investor, to some extent, has shown some kind of patience with loss-making businesses, as overvalued as they may be. But there is some now kind of acceptance, because a Zomato, a Swiggy, a Paytm have so become part of our daily lives that now people are all right seeing them on the stock markets as well. And that's, I guess, on the broader ecosystem, which has meant that now VCs, they take riskier bets, and they know that there is an opportunity for an exit via, let's say, an IPO, which is the holy grail for any venture investor, because for the longest time, India had a reputation that you can't get exits in this market. And now if we were to, let's say, look at gaming and interactive, and I'll give you a small anecdote. When we were setting up the fund at Lumikai, a lot of people told us, oh, you guys are crazy. Like gaming in India is never going to take off. India's a Dow farm. Indians don't pay for games. India is not ready for a sector focused strategy. There's not enough depth in the market. You won't see enough deal flow. There won't be enough exits. We heard all of this narrative. And this was back in just 2019. And 2020, we decided that, well, we see something in the market that maybe other people are not seeing, and it's the right time. And that's, we launched. And I think the best time to invest in a sector is when it violates a narrative. And at that point of time, Lumekai was a narrative violation. And in 2 years, we have looked at 850 companies. We have seen a gaming company go public. We have seen 3 unicorns. We have seen 3 large strategic exits, including a $500 million exit of MTG with Play Simple. We have seen numerous companies apart from real money gaming raise money in multi-million-dollar rounds. We have seen the emergence of game streaming platforms, and we're seeing for the first time in India monetization. So we did a Lumekai research report last year where we were shocked with the size of the market. The Indian market is $2.2 billion and it's expected to grow by 30% to $7 billion in the next 3 years. And in-app purchases are growing faster. Who would have thought this about the market?
Yeah. And just elaborate a bit more, Saloni, on that. How's the whole Indian gamer scenario panning out right now? I mean, earlier it was a very elite game, right? I mean, either you had a PS2 or PS3 at home or a Wii at home and so on and so forth. But I mean, there's mobile phone, there's 5G on the anvil and so on and so forth. Are you seeing deeper penetration in this category as well as we are seeing in most other categories, the tier 2, tier 3, which is driving consumption in India? Or do you feel that in this category, there's still time to skim tier 1, tier 2, and then there'll be time for a deeper penetration?
With mobile particularly, it has really democratized and transcended economic barriers and transcended these cultural barriers. So there are, at last count, 450 million gamers in the country, and they are across tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 cities. In fact, there are phenomena like Battlegrounds Mobile India is a tier 1 phenomena, whereas Garena Free Fire used to be played extensively in tier 2, tier 3 city. Also, games like Ludo, for example, it doesn't matter whether you're tier 1 or tier 2. It's such an integral part of us growing up that now you just have it on mobile and it's much easier to just play with families and friends. And I think what the pandemic, what it did to gaming is unparalleled. It essentially moved ahead the gaming revolution, so to speak, because India became the largest market for mobile gaming downloads last year. India now constitutes 17% of the world's mobile game downloads. And that's fantastic, right? It's beaten countries like the US. So there is a massive demand. And at the same time, now there is somewhat supply. And for a long time, India was an import market, where you had a lot of foreign publishers and a lot of foreign titles which were satisfying Indian demand. Now, if you look at back in 1990s, and I was to draw a parallel with, let's say, television in the early 1990s, we all grew up in tier 1 cities on, the Bold and the Beautifuls and the Beverly Hills 90210 and, all of those shows. And it's only when in content became culturally resonant, like you had a Hip Hip Hooray, or you had those Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi series appealing to the housewives, and then you had, finally other shows eventually like KBC, etc., which launched, which then became massy. That's when really content opened up. And then you started seeing some of these foreign companies do strategic investments into local content producers and start making more culturally resonant content. And there will always be tier 1 gaming content which will appeal, which is a very Americanized, westernized audience. But there will also be tier 2, tier 3 locally resonant entertainment, which is gaming driven. And great example for that is in our portfolio. We have a company called Bombay Play, which is a fantastic team, one of the most experienced design teams and engineering teams in the country. They're ex-Zynga, ex-Glue Mobile, ex-founders of Moonfrog. They're building games from India for the world, hyper-social games, so basically casual games, which they're disrupting with adding multiplayer mechanics. So whether it's your Uno, whether it's Bingo, whether it's Wordle, they're bringing it to on very simple, friction-free manner to friends and people to play with their games, to play with your networks. Then on the other side, we have a company called LOLO, which is a social gaming platform, which now has 2.5 million users. They are creator led shows which they allow the hosting of games like Chidiya Ur and Tambola and Antakshani, and that's largely appealing to female audiences in tier 2, tier 3 cities. They've got 28,000 creators on their platform. Their power user spends about 35 to 40 minutes on their platform. And they are now achieving thousands of concurrent views per minute for participating in these host-led shows. And 80% of the creators are women. So we're seeing both of that. So there is ample demand and ample supply, and there is monetization as well.
Yeah. And just going a little deeper, because I'm finding this so fascinating, Saloni. So how do you differentiate, or how do you see the two parts of this whole game? One is the play for money part with Dream 11 and so on and so forth. And we have a couple of clients in that zone where the whole model is very different, right? You open the top of the funnel, you go on IPL and you big a huge consumer driven brand, versus what you're also talking about, which is, pure, fun and play for play sake. Is there a view on which one of them will be a bigger driving head in a market such as India, or do you think that you're still out on that?
No, I feel if you look at the history of gaming, when you see the trajectory, let's say, and I'll draw an analogy to the Western audience and the Indian audience in order to answer this question. Now, if you look at the history of gaming in the Western markets, like they had a very linear trajectory. They had arcades, PC games, consoles, mobile, and they saw the evolution of business models of paid games. Then they had free-to-play games and subscription games, and now there's play to earn. So they've kind of had this very neat trajectory where they were exposed to various game types and game genres and game business models. Now in India, because of the smartphone proliferation and the fact that now we have cheap data, and the average Indian consumes about 12 gig of data per month, video games became the largest beneficiary and the platform became mobile. So you had a number of gamers who were also first-time mobile phone users. So they embraced audio chat, video chat, social messaging, social gaming, dating, all at the very first time on their mobile phone. And when we have drawn comparisons to, let's say, other markets, we know that this has happened in markets like China, or markets like Turkey, where the market has just exploded because there's this new generation of gamers who have come in, and they have always expanded the pie. So they have never cannibalized the generation before. So for example, your arcade gamers have probably been erased, but they migrated to PC. Then the console gamers came and they have just grown and have PC gaming, but they also have consoles. And then you had mobile gamers, and mobile essentially was this fantastic layer which made women game. Women were not considered gamers, but you had then the Farmville games, you had Heyday, you had Candy Crush, and for the very first time, women started playing games even though they don't self-identify as gamers. So the pie got exported. And now you've got another layer of, let's say, RMG gamers, where the pie has further expanded, right? So there are people who are playing for money, who are loving the experience of staking digital money and earning that. But there are also at the same time enough gamers who are enjoying for the pure sheer joy of playing a game. And this expansion will always happen because that's just how gaming as an industry.
You keep adding newer layers and you keep unlocking cohorts and newer audiences with that as the benefits also change, right? And
Absolutely.
And the experience changes. How do you think the Web3 technologies are going to impact gaming, right? Metaverse, blockchain, NFT. A, how will it impact, and B, how far is it, right? So we have this festival called SpeakEasy, and that's right now happening, and a part of that is happening in Metaverse. So one day I wake up and I feel it's here, and the other day I'm evaluating a certain ad. I'm talking to people who can execute this thing, can do it right now, and looks far away. So where do you feel both the trajectory and the truth lies with respect to Web3 in gaming?
Yeah, so, again, I think there is the concept of it, then there is the execution of it, and then what does it actually mean, right? So the concept of it, and as an avid gamer and technologist, I am deeply excited about the potential of what this can mean. However, at the same time, I'm also concerned at the extreme hype cycle. And India is home to a substantial crypto investor base. Whether you believe the numbers or not, whether you think it's 100 million or 50 million or 150 million, there is a certain, I guess, percentage of people who are deeply committed to this cryptocurrency as Web3 as an asset class. And while there are use cases and bull cases to be made, if Web3, let's say in gaming and media, takes off, there are also at the same time significant pain points that will prevent en masse adoption of Web3 led. And I'll talk about that when I talk about the execution. But if you look at, let's say, cryptocurrency, right? Now, crypto was supposed to be a hedge against inflation. It was supposed to be a hedge against oil squeezes. It was supposed to be a hedge against stock market volatility. It was supposed to be a hedge against geopolitical instability. It was supposed to be a store of value. But that sort of hasn't panned out as the original vision. So then, what is the purpose of this currency, and what then does it evolve into? Does it then just become a asset class, which then get our in a market which is speculative, in a market that is highly driven by mystique and particularly preys on people's fear of missing out? Then one has to wonder about what is the underlying factor and use case for this and the future of it, right? And if you are to look at it the other way around, that these are unregistered, unregulated securities with no regulation or consumer protection as well. So what happens to the average individual who wants to partake in this eventually? Right? Most people are still coming to terms with what does this 30% cryptocurrency tax mean for the average holder? How does not being able to offset your loss impact the retail investor? And that is a very big question mark, right? So that's just around the crypto side of it. Now, if you look at Web3, the critics say that this is a hyper financialization of human existence, right? Where you can make every meme, every celebrity, every bit of art, every bit of culture can make a financial token on it. Now, are you philosophically aligned with that? Are you not? Because then it goes back to that what are you then partaking on? Are you partaking on art and culture and entertainment purely for the joy of it? Or is one going to be driven by making financial returns in every aspect of your human existence?
But also on that, Saloni, also the argument that, is empowering the creator economy, right? For example, the power then moves to the individual creators and not the platforms, to the singer and not Spotify, to the artist and not, say, Christie's or whatever. I mean, that argument as well.
Exactly. But then one has to dig deeper into that argument, because majority of the NFTs or the creator tokens are sadly not taken up. In fact, the sad reality is that less than 1% of NFTs sell for more than $1,500. 75-80% of them sell for $15 or less. Majority don't even sell. Now, creator-led NFTs or these tokens, which were supposed to really democratize access, they've proven to be a dud. TikTok NFTs really failed to even get off the ground. So, and if you were to, let's say, look at NFT usage, majority of it is on a single marketplace like OpenSea. And when they capture nearly 85% of the GMV market share, and they came out and said that 80% of their NFTs that were created for free were either fraud or spam. So we are currently, I guess, in the wild west of Web3. While there is potential, while there is that future that we're being told, I'd love to know, what are the sustainable use cases here? And maybe it is perhaps, the hype cycle needs to die, the speculators need to exit, the peak, the trough of disillusionment needs to set in, the true believers will really build, and that vintage of founders and those vintage of ideas then become powerful, because then it is addressing a actual need and an actual purpose.
Until then, we kind of live in the trial and error phase.
Which is true for any major tech, right? The early days of the internet as well, right? Do you remember the early days of dial-up internet when all of us used to sit and hear that modem go, give that screechy noise? So it's the early days, right?
Yeah, no, absolutely. And how will monetization models shape up? I mean, would there be a lot more advertising funded content partnership game, or would it be subscriber based? Would it be mix? Which one would take precedence? And also in the Indian market, where are you seeing the traction most at this point in time in gaming?
So in gaming, it's been an interesting evolution for the India market. India was a ad-based monetization market for the longest time. when we did our research report last year, we discovered that actually IAP monetization out of the $2.2 billion accounts for nearly $500 million of the current market, which is outstripping ad-based monetization. And it is expected to compete with and surpass RMG-based monetization as the primary form. Now, this is because out of the 450 million gamers in India, there's an approximate paying user conversion of 20%. So this does imply, as per the research that we did, that there are 100 million gamers who actively pay in and for games. And our surveys indicated an average yearly spend of $16 per year per user. And propensities to pay are even higher in genres like which are mid-core or core genres, where paying users nearly spend up to $7 to $14 per month. And these are substantial numbers that we're talking about. Earlier, as a ad-driven markets where eCPMs were so low, nobody would have thought that numbers are even possible in a market like India. And that being said, these numbers are still much lower to, let's say, a China or a US or a Taiwan or a Korea, where the spends are nearly 3x that. But it's a very good start for, let's say, where gaming was 2 years back to where it is today. Then there are interesting forms of monetization like virtual gifting, tipping, subscriptions, which are seeing early signs of traction. Average order values across gifting and tipping are in the range of $4 to $10. And we see users expressing a higher willingness to pay when there is vernacular or uniquely Indian themes. Again, something that is new and something that we have probably not seen before. So again, these are very new behaviors which are setting in. And I anticipate that, again, with India, as many things, suddenly you see certain business models leapfrog. Especially look at Web3 right now. India is emerging to be quite a big hub for Web3 development. Right? So India does sometimes tend to leapfrog business models. This could be one as well. So we keep a very close eye on the market to see how behaviors are trending and changing. Yeah. But if you are, as a brand, A, you should be thinking about gaming, and B, if you are thinking about gaming, then associating with platforms and doing in-game integrations are a fantastic way to build eyeballs and to build new audiences.
Yeah, but are you seeing use cases of that in India already happening, or do you think we are far away from that game in India?
We're definitely seeing that. So, for example, one of our portfolio companies is a company called Loco, which is now India's leading game streaming platform. And there are a number of brands working with them, whether it's Gillette, whether it's Logitech. You are seeing these brands now embracing esports and gaming and trying to reach out to this new savvy audience base, right? Even, for example, you've got companies like Nodwin, which are large esports gaming company and tournament organizer. They've acquired NH7, Weekender, they've acquired Planet Superheroes. So they're bringing all these brands and these IPs into, let's say, mainstream gaming in a way that's never really been done before. So definitely see it happening.
Yeah, that's awesome. You spoke about vernacular. So I was talking to Anand Lunia, India Quotient in our previous season, and the way social has developed in India, right, through shared chat and so on and so forth. And you spoke about gaming and vernacular. Do you think that's the big floodgate there, or do you think here the content will be language neutral and there's not much to be done in terms of social and regional here?
We're big believers in Indian and cultural content, and there is precedence for it. When we mapped the India market to, let's say, some of the other markets that we have looked at, for example, whether it's been China or Turkey or some of the other markets, but particularly I'd say more Asian, because the Asian cultural heritage and storytelling is very prominent. Now, for example, in 2004, foreign games accounted for more than 80% of China's available game titles, and they accounted for nearly 70% of domestic revenues. By 2007, domestic games with local content accounted for nearly 60% of the China market, and at that point of time it amounted to $1.7 billion. Between 2005 and 2007, original IPs created by local developers for domestic audiences started gaining a lot of traction. You had Fantasy Westward Journey, which was based on this 16th century Chinese classic. You had World of Legend, you have Wulin 2, you had another game called Tianlong Babu, which were like these, kung fu games. These games were trailblazers at that point of time because they leveraged local culture and local history. Now, in the past, we have seen a few Indian game studios have experimented with mythology. They have experimented with historical games, but with limited success.
Yeah.
They've been constrained by resources or budget. That's changing. Nearly last quarter, we had 40% of our deal flow was India focused content. There is a heightened investor interest in gaming. We're seeing a massive surge in these ambitious young game studios founded by experienced teams and also Gen Z founders who want to build India first titles with a much bigger, bolder vision on delivering high quality gaming experiences. In fact, we have a company called Studio Sira, which is now building a card collectible game based on Indian mythology, and it's called Kurukshetra Ascension. And they are blending in characters and story and lore across the yugs and delivering it in a modern way to the new Gen Z audience who sometimes doesn't resonate with Indian history and needs a new medium to translate it. And the MVP is just gone out. They're seeing incredible traction. They've now got people are playing levels. They've set up they're getting enough demand, not just from India, but also globally. Their, experienced player is a lady from Korea called Suyin. And she's set up an esports channel trying to tell people on how to play the game and how to beat the levels. And it's incredible. These are themes which are not just appealing to the Indian audience, but they're also transcending boundaries.
Yeah. So what I hear from is the opening up of the supply side will unlock the bigger depths for this category. So which gets me to my next question, that would there be scope for people to be professional gamers in a market like India today? I mean, my 17-year-old, the more he does Fortnite, saying, what about your studies? Go and do economics, right? He's saying, but I could be a professional gamer and I could be rich. But do you think we are too far from there, or do you think that's going to happen?
That's a future which is going to happen now. Esports is a medal sport in the Asian Games, right? So we're already seeing that. In fact, in esports, whether it is playing games for just learning or watching people play games for entertainment, that's in fact drive entire industry. And these some of the names that I mentioned earlier was Loco or Nodwin Games, etc. These are all riding that wave of that current zeitgeist of how gaming is now becoming mainstream, and how now esports are viable careers, not just by participating in competitions and earning winnings, but also because these gamers are getting vast audiences and getting people to watch them in a way that was previously unimaginable. And now you have brands associating with these young gamers and these young professional esports streamers saying, okay, we want to be associated with you. And that is a shift, right? Now that's becoming a career monetization opportunity.
Yeah, no, amazing. So this has been fantastic conversation around gaming and media with you, Saloni. I want to shift a bit of a gear and discuss, being a leader and being a woman leader. I mean, first in finance, investing, media, gaming. How is it? I mean, you make it look very easy. How has it been, and the journey like on that? Have there been challenges? Have there been same challenges anybody else would have? Or is it now a equal playing field for women leaders as well?
That's very kind of you to say. I make it look easy. I have been fortunate and I'd say privileged to have a lot of family support. And I've had parents who've been incredibly progressive and who have made sure that I am bold enough to pursue my dreams, whatever it may be. Even if it was, leaving investment banking and private equity, which were fairly lucrative professions, to then go and say, well, I'm going to build a company, and that too in gaming, which my parents clearly didn't understand any of it. And, they've obviously had to defend my career choices in their social circles as well. Because I guess when I wanted to do business school, my father had heard things like, why are you spending so much money sending her to business school? And my father would say, A, she's taking a loan, and B, that's what she wants to do. And I'm very confident that she will be able to make a career and pay back the loans and also be able to stand on her feet. And I'd rather that she takes a loan rather than get married. Or, for example, when I was setting up a company, most people would be like, ki, acha, to company bana liye, par banate kya ho? So you have, but even before that, the path for female leaders is strewn with, it's a thorny path, and many times women just walk alone. And I've built companies in a pretty male-dominated field. I worked in investment banking and private equity, and then I co-launched a VC fund. So it's been a lot of running through walls, from hearing things like, oh, nobody will marry you, or you need to be more demure, or wear heels to work so that people take you seriously, or smile more, you can be intimidating. There's this long instruction manual of what to do as a woman to succeed in your career. None of it written by a woman, most likely, but
Yeah,
you'll get this unsolicited
absolutely.
advice from everybody in society, right? So, I've heard a lot of that. And so I think for my journey was a lot of floundering around with no role models, no mentors, battling a lot of imposter syndrome and plenty of self-doubt. But finally, it took me to my mid 30s to realize that, I am what I am. And instead of fighting to suit into society's mold, I should just
Yeah.
embrace it. And I've been very fortunate to have a good family and an amazing spouse who's a fantastic champion. And eventually, I did get married. So,
Yeah, you can tell all the women out there it happens. Don't worry.
it does happen. You'll find a man who'll raise you for who you are, but it's a lot. I think the path for women, and I hear this great quote. It says that, to be a woman is tough. You need to act like a lady, you need to, look like a young girl, and you need to work like a horse.
Oh my God, that's a lot. Yeah. But what would be your mantra? I mean, having been through all of it, and I mean, to say young women who are listening to this podcast, what would be 2 or 3 things you'll tell them which will help them, kind of use your experience and go through this a bit more easy?
I think the first thing is just keep swimming. It's going to get hard, and yes, you're going to have peaks and troughs, and you are going to be disillusioned, and there are going to be enough naysayers, but you have to keep swimming. And that's incredibly important because, there are very few people who probably want you to win. And it's all right to just focus on those and just keep looking at your goal, whatever that may be. You want to be the best homemaker when everybody's telling you, oh, you're wasting your life and you should, go back to your job. And, whatever your choices are in life, just keep swimming. I think that's a very key one. And the second is, and for the longest time, I didn't do it, is that you have to stop seeking external validation.
Yeah.
And that's a very tough one. And it's difficult for me as well.
It's because of the way we've been brought up.
It's because of the way we've been brought up, and now even more so with social media, right? We
Yeah.
have now learned to swipe more than type. We are, the dopamine hit of a like and a positive comment is much greater than a troll suddenly pulling you down and saying something to you, and how that affects us. And I think that's a work in progress. I'm not sure if anybody gets there, but you have to stop seeking external validation and you have to just embrace who you are. And I think those are the top 2 things that I have kept as a mantra in my life.
That's awesome. And on a lighter note, do you play games? Do you have any favorite games?
Of course.
Yeah.
Of course. I love playing this game called The Witcher. It's a perfect fantasy fiction world. And if you see my bookcase and behind, I've got like all 5 of these like Witcher books there. I love the games. I also play a game called Design Home, which is mobile. And recently I've been loving Wordle actually. It's a simple game, but it's so fun. But yeah, very avid game player.
That's fantastic. Saloni, thank you so much for this conversation. And at this stage in podcast, we switch the mic, right? So
Yes, I know. I was going to ask you, when do I get to ask you the questions?
you get to grill me back. And yeah, it's all yours
Yeah.
and I'm ready.
Awesome. So are you a gamer? And what games do you play?
So that's a tough one, right? I think I've been avid gamer, right? The early games, I used to play Wii with my son younger. I was the first guy who brought Move. I imported that, the tools which came with PS4, and we used to play table tennis and all of that. And then I completely lost out of the whole thing, and now I don't play much. No.
Yeah, well, it's never too late to start.
Yeah, maybe. I mean, with all this energy coming back, and maybe come back and give this a shot.
Got it. And if I had to put you in the investor hot seat, what game would you invest in? Or any company that you think is great that you would like to invest in?
So there are 2 games which get played in my house all the time. There's FIFA and there's Fortnite.
Fortnite, okay, Epic and EA. That's a good easy one.
Easy ones too. But the fan following and the cult that I see around them, as early investor, that would be my pick.
Yeah. And if you were born as a Gen Z or a digital native, would you want to be a professional gamer?
I don't know. See, my whole thing is that, I've in fact always sucked at all kind of sports. So, so I was actually a nerd and made my way more through debates and things like that. I don't think even if I was a Gen Z, I would too much be into gaming.
And given an opportunity for, let's say, advertising in the metaverse, which brand
Yeah.
would you pick first?
I think the good thing, Saloni, is that a lot of our brands are very new age. Most of our brands talk to youth and Gen Z and so on and so forth. The two brands which come to my mind immediately, one is Spotify. So music and youth and Gen Z, I think goes very well with that. Second is Jeep. Right, I'm curious to see how we can use something such as metaverse for a brand such as Jeep, which is all about outdoors, the great outdoors, the experience, and so on and so forth. So those are two brands which come to my mind immediately.
Yeah. And that's incredible. I don't know if you know, but there used to be these games called The Sims, and Dunkin' Donuts actually did a brand integration with Sims. So did Vespa, where you had these
Wow.
cute little Vespas in could get.
Yeah.
It was very fun at one point of time, but yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
But
Super.
awesome. This was great.
Yeah, thank you so much, Saloni. That brings us to the end of our conversation. If anybody who's listening to us right now wants to send you a comment, connect with you, mentorship, pitch an idea, what's the best way to connect with you?
LinkedIn and Twitter, and also email. We typically are fairly responsive. So, just drop me a LinkedIn, Twitter, or email.
And what's your handle on Twitter?
It's @Salone Sehgal, and Salone is spelled with an E.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Saloni.
Thank you so much for having me.